Those of you that preach on a regular basis will recognize that this was the reading from the Hebrew Bible, this passage from Isaiah and the 6th chapter from this past Sunday. And either I'm not through with it or it's not through with me. But it seemed as I approached this occasion that it had something of the right essence and word that I needed to hear, and I hope that you need to hear as well. In one sense, it is a word that I needed to hear anew and afresh, because I don't know of any text that I heard more in reference to personal autobiographical expressions of the call to Christian ministry than I heard this text. Used sometimes as a whole passage or a pericope, that wonderful word you learn in your first week of seminary here or at any other theological educational institution. And you learn to distinguish it from periscope. But this has been a shaping narrative in certain cultural communities in particular around the biography of those who feel themselves called to a particularized and focused ministry. It has also been a shaping narrative for communities of faith that have been trying to really understand their vocation as a community and their call to prophetic ministry. And it begins, as you well know, with this towering drama of Isaiah in the temple. I used to hear the old unlettered preachers, and maybe they were more lettered than I thought them to be, and they were using a twisting and a nuancing of the words to great effect. They would say, in the year that King Uzziah died. And if you go back to the older translations into English, they would say, I also. The also has been dropped in a number of modern translations, and I it's no big deal to me, but the poetry, in the year that King Uzziah died, I also, as if, whether or not it's in the original Hebrew, I cannot say for sure, as if this is not really, even though it appears to be, a solitary experience. Others have come before me who have also had experiences of the majesty and the grandeur and the beauty and the awesomeness and the power of Jehovah God. So our experiences of call are profoundly personal and unique, and yet we ain't the only ones. Our experiences of Christian worship, profoundly meaningful to us, but not to us only. And we got to move in our age from this deep parochialism of personalization to rediscover corporate identity. I also saw the Lord. And then in great poetic language describes just, this is not even the tip of the iceberg. Not even a scratching of the surface. It is the feeble groping with human language to capture something of an experience that really cannot be conveyed. I mean, listen to this poetry. The presence of God was so rife in the temple that day, at least to me, Isaiah said, that it seemed to me that there was such a fullness, great God from Zion, of God's godness in the place. And yet I knew, Isaiah says, it's there, that I was not even capturing much of the power and the mystery. But if you can imagine, he says, that the hem of the divine one's garment filled the temple. There was so much God, and yet it's almost as if Isaiah is saying, I was protected from more God than I could handle. That God's train was between me and God. Sometimes we want more in our experiences of God, and we ain't ready for more. I mean, we would be messed up if God gave us more of some of what we're asking for before we're ready for it. But God gives us sufficient of God's self that we can begin to peep and peer into the mystery and the reality and the truth of who God is and what God is about. And Isaiah goes on to say, he says it was like the whole place was shaking and quaking. The very doorposts were twisting on their pivots. You're talking about attention to detail. And then it was as if I saw, attending unto what I could see of God's godness, these fiery creatures. And I tell you, the preachers of my boyhood used to, they'd go to running on that. You don't have time for me to run on the seraphim this morning, but they and their whole body of songs about it. With two wings they covered their feet, and with two wings they covered their faces. And then I remember one preacher of my boyhood saying that when the holiness became too much even for the fiery ones, they needed the other two wings so they could just fly. Have you ever been in the presence of such love and such grandeur, human or divine, that you just for a while had to say, I can't stand it? It's just too much. And we need some more too much experiences. And I want you to know I struggle with this because we're so casual.
Come on now. Make it plain.
And I get it. I've rubbed my head up against some of these walls. I understand. And it's a critical tension between transcendence and immanence. The God who is wholly other and the God who comes near. Who stoops so low. Even in the person of a little vulnerable baby of a poor peasant girl. But we've become so familiar. This is an editorial comment. This is not on the text. Paul said, this is not from the Lord, but I'm right anyhow. I learned that here at Duke Divinity School. I didn't know Paul had said that, but it's been greatly helpful to me. So much that the fiery ones even had to fly away. In the presence of that holiness, one becomes, after you get through being overwhelmed, and you never quite get through being overwhelmed, but shall we say you become aware in new and fresh ways, not only of who God is, but of who you are in the light and in the countenance of God. So Isaiah says, just in exclamation, I'm undone. I mean, I'm toe up from the flow up, in case undone doesn't work for you. I'm coming apart at the seams because in the midst of this encounter, I'm understanding something of who God is, and God's holiness is reminding me or bringing me into an awareness of how not holy I am. That's not a bad thing. You know, we're so into avoiding guilt in our age. We don't want to say anything that's going to put anybody on any kind of guilt trip. And there's no great value to guilt in and of itself, but we're so cautious. We just go tippy-toeing around. And you know, I want you to know, may I say this, even an unbelieving world can handle it better than you think they can. You go on and say what needs to be said. And so Isaiah says, I became aware of how not holy I am. And the metaphor is, I am a man of unclean lips. And I dwell in the midst of, you see, from the personal to the communal, in the midst of a people of unclean lips. I mean, this text, I could do 7 nights in a revival. And you all want it done in 25 minutes. Hallelujah. With God, all things are possible. I've also wondered, this is too much psychology, but I've also wondered if Isaiah knew that something was about to come down. This is imaginative. And said, let me get my excuse wall up. I'm a man of unclean lips. And all of a sudden, swoops down on the altar with tongues, grabs a live coal and says, here, problem solved. This has touched your lips. And then God moves in for the kill or for the life, as the case may be. And Isaiah becomes privy to some conversation. Don't make too much of this as Trinitarian. It's just so much God in the house. Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Uzziah is dead. Judah is being courted about getting into bed politically and militarily and economically with some folks that Judah doesn't need to be in bed with. And the counsel of the Most High says, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Who can bear a fiery word and speak to this people who are about to be seduced into one of the worst decisions of their lives? And if you think this is an ancient word lacking in relevance, I say look again. You need only read any periodical on the newsstand this morning, and you wonder what word comes from on high to speak to the seductions in which we find ourselves. And having already succumbed to political, military, and economic seductions, we find ourselves in part in the messes that we are in. And the world is looking for a prophetic word. It's just a matter or not as to whether or not it's going to come from here, or whether it will be a voice that says, how shall we say, how's that hopey, changey thing working out for you? Because we choose our prophets. And we set them up and we prop them up. And Isaiah's about to find that out, because he doesn't have any better sense than to say, here am I, send me. He should have gotten the heaven out while he could have. but in the moment, it seems like the right thing to do. After all, this is the majesty on high, speaking in this time and place and this context. I need a voice. I need someone who will pay attention to words. I need some community with courage, who will not wimp out, that has heart to say to the principalities and the power, whether or not they're in the church or in the world, help me, Holy Spirit, help me, Holy Spirit. I need somebody and somebodies who will go. And Isaiah says, here I am, Lord, send me. Now, of course, you're smarter than that. You want to know what the mission is. Where, Yahweh, is your strategic plan? But Isaiah says, yes, send me. And then the mission unfolds. Isn't it just wonderful that in the lectionary, verses 9 through 13 are in parens? It's optional, preachers. I can't tell you how long I avoided 9 through 13. Be smarter than some who've come before you. Because really, it's a wonderfully warm, fuzzy narrative if you stop at 8. I mean, you know, it's Isaiah and Yahweh, but nothing's at stake. Even after the summons and the yes, nothing is really at stake until Yahweh says, I want you to go yonder and I want you to preach like you're crazy. Because the script that I'm going to give you is antithetical to the script that you think I would give you. Because you think I'm sending you down there to woo everybody in and to court everybody with nice words and as would be picked up in the epistles, to soothe itching ears. Woo! And Yahweh says, not today. There's a time for that. There's a place for comfort. And I'm trying to say, well, listen, Yahweh, you know, you want to win people. And basically, you're going to come over here and say, listen, talk to them, Isaiah, till their ears get fatter than they are. Till they can't hear and can't perceive and are utterly immobilized. I've been struggling with that, and fortunately, there have been some courageous exegetes and theologians who've reminded me and remind you through me that the first message is, when you say this doesn't match up, that it's not about you. It's not about you. In fact, you don't even do the warm, fuzzy stuff of the ministry to which you've been called with an eye toward it being about you. Let me see if I can say that another way. Do not let your ministry be shaped by a paradigm of how much favor you can curry. Now, do not leave this room and say, the bishop said we ought to go out and try to tick off all the people we can. No, I merely said, do not let your entire ministry and discipleship be shaped by worrying about what folks think about you. But you ought not let it be shaped by going out trying to be a hard case with everybody. Your job is to be obedient and to trust in the one who sent you. And trust that wherever you fit in, there is a strategic plan. And it's going somewhere. Now, the second thing is this. antithetical to the purposes of Yahweh. Yahweh is saying, listen, y'all, you did not understand that Yahweh speaks in multiple dialects across the cultures of this world. Yahweh says things are going to get worse before they get better. How do I know that? The commission is given, the mission is focused, and Isaiah is whiplashed and says, how long, oh Lord? I mean, how long do you want me to go out there buying trouble when it's not on sale? And Yahweh says, until things get worse than they are. Now, here we go. We have so been shaped in the model of currying favor, especially with those who pay the bills, that a preacher friend of mine, who I was his bishop in Iowa, he was a kind of out on the edge guy, retired, just at times a nemesis to me. I mean, he's one of these preachers, well, Bishop, why aren't you out there doing this, that, and the other? I just was never at the right places for the right causes to suit this preacher. He was really retired because he was disaffected. And yet, in his own way, he loved the United Methodist Church deeply. And he just wanted us to do better. Like there are people in all of our churches that just want the church to be the church. And he had my attention. I sometimes would avoid his calls, I confess. I just said, I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough psychic, spiritual, emotional energy for this guy. When I wouldn't answer his calls, he would send me position papers. Just wore me out. Well, I couldn't turn him off. So I changed my strategy. I said, Reverend, come on up here and meet with me. And finally, after hours of conversation, much of it invigorating, about how the church has gone after the gods of Baal. He said, all I want, don't forget the text now, is enough honesty that we can be honest enough in the church that we might say something, Bill, that we might have to ask forgiveness for. He had my attention. We become so polite and so sedate and so aligned to the culture and the principalities and the powers that we're not even about some days, certainly not corporately, to say anything that we might have to ask forgiveness for later. And he said, would you just risk something? Something for the gospel. And his words haunt me. They haunt me whenever I try to say something and get it politically correct. I hear his voice. Be honest enough that you might say something that you might have to ask for forgiveness for later. Milton Brunson and the Chicago Mass Choir. In the late 80s, had a song that wore me out. The refrain of which was simply, Lord, I'm available to you. My storage, some computer programmer wrote this, my storage is empty. And Lord, I'm available to you. I stopped by drive from Springfield, Illinois. You're here because you said you're available. When you hear this word, I want to ask you, are you still available? And I want you to know, if you go, the master will go with you. If you go, the master will stand by you. Jesus said, when you're drugged before councils and you don't even know what to say, I will give you in that very hour the what to say. So I came by to testify. After 31 years after graduating from here, brand spanking new, wet behind the ears, thought I knew everything, was going to change the church and change the world, but I've been humbled by time. But I came by to tell you, Master, I'm still available. Use me, Lord, use even me. I'm still available. If you need somebody to go, I'll go. If you need somebody to preach, I'll preach. Somebody to sing, I'll sing. Somebody to testify, I'll testify. Lord, I am still